I'm Ernie Humphrey, Educational Programs Leader for Performative, the largest online community for corporate finance, accounting, treasury, and related professionals. I'd like to welcome everyone to today's webinar, Beyond Spreadsheets, How to Take Your Budgeting and Planning to the Next Level. Technology is the key to unlocking the strategic value of budgeting and planning for your company. Today's webinar content will include a discussion of 6 proven best practices for best-in-class budgeting and planning and benchmarking data, and deliver actionable advice on how to improve your company's budgeting and planning process. You will hear from Rick Smith, Manager FP&A at Engine Yard, a high-growth technology company, who will share how he's performing headcount planning, CapEx planning, and more. And you'll experience an adaptive planning product demo to see what strategic planning looks like when a company moves beyond spreadsheets. I'd like to thank Adaptive Planning, whose commitment to thought leadership helps us make this webinar possible and delivered at no cost. A quick note on today's agenda. First, we'll have presentations from Paul Turner and Rick Smith. Brian Cawley will then deliver an adaptive planning product demo, and then we'll move to our interactive Q&A discussion. We will spend the remainder of our hour. We'd like this to be an interactive experience for you, so if you have any questions at any time, please go to the questions area in your GoToWebinar control panel and just send us your questions. We can't promise to get all of them in, but we will do our best and follow up afterwards on any questions that we did not get to. A few more logistical notes on the webinar today. A link to today's presentation and video recording of the webinar will be sent out to attendees within 24 hours of the event. Please note the presentation is already posted at www.performative.com/resources for a free download. Also note today's webinar includes a tech demo and as such is not eligible for CPE credit. Again, we encourage you to ask questions on today's topic via the questions area in your GoToWebinar control panel anytime during the webinar. Finally, you'll be asked to take a short survey today regarding the webinar. We greatly appreciate your feedback regarding our event today, as we always strive to improve the ROI we offer our event attendees for their valuable time. A quick word about Performative. Performative is the largest online community resource for senior-level corporate finance, accounting, treasury, and related professionals. Performative connects corporate finance leaders to provide instant advice on insights on the tough financial and strategic challenges that they play every day. Okay, let's get started by introducing today's first speaker, Paul Turner, Senior Director of Product Strategy at Adaptive Planning. Paul has spent nearly 20 years in corporate performance management, business intelligence, and ERP. He started his career in implementing EMEA business planning and forecasting within finance at Rank Xerox and spent nearly 10 years at Hyperion in consulting, product M&A, and strategy roles. Paul has implemented OLAP-based analytics at leading Fortune 500 organizations and has experience beyond finance in sales and operational planning. Most recently, Paul focused on cloud ERP at both NetSuite and Workday. Paul is a BS in computer science from Lancaster University. With that, it is my distinct pleasure to hand the floor over to our first speaker, Paul Turner from Adaptive Planning. Paul, take it away.
Hey, thanks very much, Johnny. With all that experience, I wonder if I can move these slides forward. So you never know. But hey, it's great to be on the call, everyone. And 20 years experience makes me feel really old. I've got a great webinar for you today. I'm going to take you through some sort of best practices we're seeing out there to help improve FP&A. I'm going to share some survey results with you. Hand over to Rick, and Rick's going to share with you how he's doing it at Engine Yard. And then Brian's got a great demo to share with you too. So it should be a really great way to spend your next hour or so. When we speak to, we speak to about 2,000 organizations. We help them with their planning and performance management processes here at Adaptive. We actually have a lot of data to share with you what we hear from FP&A executives. So some of the things we're seeing is we're seeing kind of a natural progression in kind of the planning process. It's a kind of a transition, and I think Rick's going to share some of this with you a little bit too. But from being just budgeting to being much more kind of operational, performed on much more of an ongoing basis. And so there's a growing need for more accurate variances. We're seeing a transition towards our rolling forecasts. I'll share some data with you a little bit later on. And also getting down to the underlying drives as well. So going from the financial plan to dropping right down into the operational plan as well, so some linkage around that. So when we look at what some of the kind of best run businesses are doing now, or some of the businesses that have cracked the code on their planning process, what they're doing actually is they're making a much more collaborative process, making a much more self-service process as well, distributed, and they're also increasingly engaging budget managers. When you look at this chart, a lot of organizations are kind of step 1 and step 2, but we're seeing more and more businesses really move down this pipe, going from a centralized to a much more decentralized process. So kind of quick few best practices here. So the first area is we're seeing an increased move to using rolling forecasts. I'm sure you guys are too. When we asked finance leaders how frequently they're forecasting, About half said biannually or annually, but we're seeing this in itself change over time, and more forecasting moving to a kind of quarterly and monthly basis. So basically, the periodicity around this is increasing. One of the reasons we're seeing this is that basically businesses are moving faster. There's a lot more data on hand. People are increasingly expecting more accurate data as well. But the fact is that a lot of data is obsolete once you get kind of beyond 4 months out. And so after that, forecasts increasingly become irrelevant and out of touch with the business. So it's really important that you do it on a rolling basis so that those forecasts accurately reflect business conditions. What we see is a lot of challenges right now in terms of data collection and integration. It's hard to bring data in to create those rolling forecasts. A lot of time spent on moving into spreadsheets. So if you really want to crack the code on this, you've got to really focus on importing actuals, getting it in quickly, and then really pivoting the plan off of that. Beyond a certain point, it's really hard to do that in spreadsheets. Another kind of key area, automating KPIs and dashboards and scorecards. Everyone talks about KPIs and dashboards and scorecards, but the reality is that more than half of businesses actually aren't doing this today at all, or doing it on a very kind of informal basis. And about a quarter are taking more than 5 days, and about 10% taking more than 10 days. So, for some organizations, it's more than a couple of weeks to roll that out. So to create plans you can actually react on, and analytics to go ahead and then change your plan, we think it's really important to have timed information. So when we speak to businesses, really it's about getting towards that, where that 9% are, that 1 to 2 kind of range. One of the things we're also seeing is a big gap, or a growing gap, between the management metrics and accounting metrics and the more non-traditional measures as well. Gartner has this chart here kind of showing this gap over time, but more and more data points around non-traditional metrics like lifetime value, churn, total contract value, increasingly more important metrics to plan on. It also means to be on the planning side of things and the analytics side of things. More data has to be rolled in from different systems, Salesforce and some of those other systems. Another kind of best practice here we see is more and more linked and driver-based plans. If you think back to that maturity chart a little bit earlier on, that's kind of a step that organizations are kind of moving down. When we speak with organizations today, and I'm sure it's the same at your business too, is that many of those plans are not integrated, and so HR, the sales ops team, finance team, everyone has done kind of like disconnected plans, in some cases disconnected planning cycles. So the sales plan, the sales quota, and the revenue plan doesn't perhaps talk to the financial plan. That doesn't talk to the headcount plan to manage staffing and those areas. So a lot of it's unintegrated, a lot of it on a different cycle. So it's really important to try and link and kind of coordinate those processes. But it's really hard to do that, to be honest, when maybe one team's on a planning system, maybe another team's on Excel, maybe another team's doing on the back of a napkin or by email, that kind of stuff. It's really hard to link and coordinate that and go from a financial plan to more operational plans and link those guys together when everyone's on different systems and processes. So what you really want to focus on is really ensuring that your ops managers have customized models that are tailored to what they need, whether it's managing headcount and compensation or calculating sales quota, but also make sure that it all connects together as well, that isn't fragmented. So you have to make it customized so people engage with the process. They don't end up with a foreign system, but also make it all show it's personalized and customized to their particular business process. So it's going to be really important to crack the code on this to get to that level of alignment. Another area we're seeing is kind of a move towards enterprise-wide collaboration. You kind of get into the budgeting and planning kind of Jedis on this side of thing. What we're seeing right now is that we thought, when we surveyed, it was actually from CFO Research. A lot of organizations, managers, still not participating fully in the overall kind of budgeting cycle. Often it's still left to finance to rekey some of that stuff in or coax that stuff out of them. So what we see is it means a lot more work for finance, and it also means less relevant plans and budgets too. What Aberdeen Research found is that companies that are really got kind of best-in-class planning processes have really kind of cracked the code on this. Managers are on the hook for the budget. They're actually entering the budget themselves. They're commenting on the budget. They're doing some of the modeling themselves, and they're truly collaborating. So much less centralized process, much more decentralized. And I think this has a real kind of profound implication on spreadsheet-driven processes. It's really hard to do that with email and spreadsheets, or at least very hard to do that efficiently and accurately as well. Self-service, so everyone talks about self-service and moving to an on-demand culture. We think this is increasingly important for reporting, analytics, and planning too. So self-service is becoming increasingly important. Right now, it's a survey from an SI, Armanino McKenna. The bulk of organizations lean on finance for the information they need. So about 83% are requesting finance. And what we're seeing is a major pull towards self-service. So it's really about getting out of the business of emailing spreadsheets around and then moving people online for the reports that they need. So getting out of that kind of like centralized service function role. And finally, everyone's favorite topic, reconsider spreadsheets. We have an interesting quote here from ACCA, right? More than 90% of spreadsheets contain serious errors, but more than 90% are convinced they're error-free. So we really think, and when we speak to businesses, we think it's really hard to scale a planning process with spreadsheets. A lot of organizations we speak to quickly end up with hundreds of spreadsheets linked together and with logic that changes. You have the master spreadsheet that all rolls up into. There's people changing the calculations in it. Some of the data is out of date. Some of the drivers may be inconsistent in certain spreadsheets, and then some poor person on the back end is having to roll those things together and build a plan. The result is a lot of time, a lot of errors, and basically the plan, the forecast, the budget, often it becomes a lot less useful, a lot more, in some cases, irrelevant in some organizations. So before I pass it over to Rick to share his experiences, just a very quick, let's show the adaptive approach. So we support about 2,000 organizations doing the service via the cloud. Brian's going to share that with you in his demonstration. So our perspective is, no more spreadsheets, everything in one place, and our customers tell us that this makes their life a lot easier. What we do with our solution, so it's all delivered by the cloud, and it's a complete suite. It's planning, it's consolidation, it's analytics, and it's all working together. So we make it very easy to get the actuals into the plan. The scorecards and analytics are all real time from the results, from the plans, from the actuals. And what our customers report is about 80% faster planning and also time to reporting too. So it really frees up the finance function. It also makes that plan much more timely, accurate, and relevant. And then just final slide, Brian, over to Rick here. We have about 2,000 customers, as I mentioned earlier, using it worldwide. Everything from hot, fast-growing companies like SurveyMonkey and Box, all the way through to organizations like AAA, Coca-Cola, Avis, John Deere, Boston Scientific, and more. So a real wide range of companies that are moving from spreadsheets, moving from those traditional hard-to-run implement systems like Hyperion, for example, and moving to a much more kind of agile, cloud-based approach for this. And so with that, I'm going to hand it over to Rick, who's going to share his experiences at Engine Yard. So over to you, Rick.
Thank you very much, Paul. I'm going to go ahead and introduce our next speaker, Rick Smith, Manager FP&A Engine Yard. Prior to Engine Yard, Rick held the same role for Navis, a software company whose technology is a global standard for managing the movement of cargo through terminals. Rick rolled out adaptive planning as a tool for forecasting, budgeting, and strategic planning for operations, as well as several acquisitions, and ultimately the company's divestiture from Zebra Technologies to Cargotech Corporation. Rick earned an MBA from the University of New Hampshire with a concentration in finance. So with that, it is my distinct pleasure to hand the floor over to Rick Smith, Manager FP&A Engine Yard. Rick, take it away for us.
Thanks, Ernie, and thanks, Paul. Good afternoon or morning, depending on where you are. Just a quick little spiel on Engine Yard as to where I am located now. We are the leading platform as a service. We basically enable our customers to focus on building innovative applications in the cloud rather than spending time and needless resources on the underlying technology that really doesn't add any value to their businesses. There's no differentiating aspect to the hardware and platform that a software application in the cloud is really running. To give you a better sense, this little graphic down in the bottom corner of the slide, there's really 3 layers of a cloud-based operation, and basically everyone is pretty much familiar with software as a service, Salesforce.com or NetSuite, for example, but it could be as simple as a website or a marketing campaign launched in the cloud. But underneath that, a little less known, is the infrastructure as a service, which is, that application is running somewhere on the hard metal in the data center somewhere, and that could be a private cloud or a public offering based on like Amazon or Verizon or Microsoft's Azure. But then we really operate in the middle space, the platform as a service, which basically integrates the infrastructure with the application itself, and it deploys additional resources, manages, and we offer support. We have several solutions that we offer our customers, pay-as-you-go and subscription-based. The pay-as-you-go is more metered and more focused towards our Web 2.0 startups, which we've had a number of customers such as Badgeville or Bleacher Reports, to even Groupon, was running on our service, to Fortune 500 companies, Audi, Caterpillar, HP, a number of different types of companies uses our services for a variety of different reasons. But we're headquartered in San Francisco, and we have offices in New York, Oregon, Ireland, and Japan, with a support organization which spans around the globe. So we actually have kind of a complex organization in terms of unique locations and things to think about in terms of planning. And when I first joined the company in late 2011, I joined right at the tail end of a budgeting season that was all spreadsheet-based. And basically, there was a spreadsheet for each department, which encompassed their workforce planning and their department spend, as well as some of the capital expenditures they were expecting to make. And these all rolled up into a master mothership spreadsheet that the CFO was using to present to the board. And there was some on the order of about 30 different spreadsheets rolling into this. And the CFO, was breaking apart each individual plan, sending it out to the responsible manager, so they only had access to their information. And then when they sent it back, he had to re-link all of these cells back into the master mothership file. And I just can't understand how he spent that much time and effort into that when he could have been probably offering a lot more value with other aspects of the business. But it really led to a limited audit trail, which led into ownership issues later on in the year. Oftentimes you hear different department managers say, well, those aren't my numbers, those are finance's numbers. I've never seen those before. And there's no real record of tracking where those came unless you want to sort through the hundreds of emails going through a budgeting season. So it really ended up in being no accountability in the overall plan. So my first task when I joined Engine Yard was we wanted to roll our budgeting and forecasting process into a cloud-based offering, and we selected adaptive planning. The 2012 plan was really done in Excel, and I took that information, understood the model of the business, recreated the model in adaptive planning, and loaded the financial information that we had from the Excel spreadsheets. And we immediately found that we had just presented the plan to the board of directors, and wow, there were a lot of errors. Some cells weren't added correctly, some of the links were broken, an entire department had been missed. So from day one after presenting to the board, our plan was already obsolete. So using the cloud application with adaptive planning, we rolled out an updated plan, updated our board, had a much more methodical process and auditable process in terms of workforce planning, capital budgeting, the department expenses, and basically really created a full set of financials that were vetted out on a much more accurate basis. In doing this, we enabled our managers to see what they were actually doing and how it rolled up into their overall plan. We were able to really customize the view for those who's budgeting. Oftentimes an software engineering department is not going to be worried about marketing spend or marketing type line items, so we can customize their views that they only see the expense line items that are pertinent to their departments and areas. But we really leveraged adaptive planning to make it more than just the forecast, but the reporting, the collaboration behind it, the customization, and basically really involve finance in a meaningful discussion with the rest of our organization. really engaged the organization as a whole. Currently today, we're working on rolling out a 4-quarter forecast process. We just successfully completed our first round of that. We did a quarterly forecast for Q3, but we extended that out through the end of next year, and we already have a template for our 2014 plan. Excuse me. We're also currently working on expanding a lot of the bells and whistles in adaptive planning to do data visualization. It's really becoming the central hub for all of our reporting, whether it's financial or non-financial metrics. We're looking at customer growth, invoicing, churn, lifetime value, a number of factors that's really being rolled into the overall process, and it's now become an issue that our budgeting managers aren't dreading the budgeting process and only looking at it once a year and never revisiting again. They're looking at this on a monthly basis, revising their estimates, and going forward to figure out what they need to do to drive the operation. So in hindsight, bringing on adaptive planning and getting out of the Excel hell that we were dealing with, we've really leveraged a lot of the best practices that Paul spoke of in terms of driving collaboration. We can quickly revise and create meaningful updated scenarios as the business changes. Usually your plan becomes obsolete somewhere around Q2, towards the end of Q2. There's always something that comes up and was potentially unforeseen or in either direction, and being able to quickly create a different scenario and what-if analysis, really is very meaningful and adds value to the overall organization, so that the finance team doesn't become just a, hey, here's the numbers, I don't know what they mean. It's really providing additional insight into the overall structure of the business. So with adaptive planning, we've been able to become very flexible and really help drive change for the business. And that pretty much ends my little thing, so I will turn it over to Ernie again.
Okay, thank you very much, Rick, for your compelling content and insight. At this point, I'm going to introduce our final speaker, Brian Colley, who's going to run us through the adaptive planning demo. Brian is a solution specialist. Over the last 20 years, Brian has helped many organizations implement successful business intelligence solution. For the last 10 years until he joined adaptive planning, Brian worked as an independent consultant specializing in management planning, analysis, and reporting. During that time, he shared his corporate performance management experience with several countries, including Infor, Roger Wireless, Wyeth Pharmaceuticals, and the Bank of Montreal. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn control over to Brian Colley, Solution Specialist at Adaptive Addy. Brian, please take it away.
And I believe now you can see my screen. So thanks, Ernie. Thanks for inviting me here for today. We'll be taking a quick tour through adaptive planning and covering off the 6 best practices that Paul identified in the first part of the presentation. So here we're on a sheet of adaptive planning related to expenses, and one of the key things that adaptive planning allows you to do in advantage over using spreadsheets is to eliminate a lot of the formulas that cause you the grief when you're using spreadsheets. Adaptive keeps all the flexibility you like about spreadsheets, allowing you to plan the way that you require, using your business drivers, using your business rules. And it's also self-service in the fact that it's designed for business professionals to create the application, to tailor it to their business, and to make it their own. It's not an IT task that requires extensive training. It's all something that a business individual can do on their own. So it maintains those great things about spreadsheets. The one way that we go beyond spreadsheets is to allow you to, to create hierarchies. And with hierarchies, you're replacing many formulas with a tree-level approach to your information. So here on the right-hand side of the screen, I've dropped down the level tree. It's really just your organizational structure that you've built into adaptive planning. In the example I'm showing you here, we have various departments such as our North, South, East, and West sales departments, rolling into geographical units such as United States, and then following that, rolling up to different functional areas of the organization, operations, we have a branch for the corporate, and then finally into an entity level. And with the level structure built, that information appears automatically in any sheet and any report that you design. And you aren't copying and pasting and carrying formulas from one sheet to the next sheet to the next workbook and having to maintain that information over and over again. You really just keep that information about your organization structure in one place and maintain it there, reducing your overhead burden in rolling up your organization. Similarly, on the left-hand side of the screen, we replace a lot of the formulas using account hierarchies. So in the example here, we see payroll, taxes and benefits, office expenses, travel and entertainment, and the like, rolling up into your operating expenses. And expanding out these groups, you'll see further account detail. Again, because we build this account structure once, we don't have all these copies of formulas, and it really helps to reduce the error aspect of making mistakes and bringing them and repeating them over and over again. And because these sheets are really single templates that you create but then use across your entire organization, you don't need to create one workbook for North Sales, one workbook for East Sales. You're really just maintaining and creating one template and then using the level selector here on the right, choosing the part of the organization that you want to plan or budget for. So I'll go ahead and select the North Sales area, and we'll see that the sheet populates with the information for that department. And as we look down the screen, we'll notice that here on the left-hand side, some of the numbers appear in green, and that tells us that those are actuals that are being pulled into our rolling forecast. And then in this particular version of the plans, we're being asked to go ahead and forecast out the remainder of the year, March through December. Maintaining these rolling forecasts, which was another point of best practice in Paul's presentation, is very easy to do with adaptive because really you're loading your actuals from your general ledger system or ERP system month by month, and as that information gets added to the system, you simply adjust where your starting period begins, and the actuals will automatically drop into the next month's period. And you can do that month by month or quarter by quarter and do that repeating rolling forecast, that repeating quarterly forecast or monthly forecast if you feel up to that, and really allowing you to capture information on a more frequent basis, creating a more meaningful plan, and feeding up information from the various areas of the organization and accurately reflecting what's occurring in your business today instead of at the beginning of the year if you're just doing annual planning. Now, on the spreadsheet, you'll notice that in some locations there are cells with little purple icons in them, and that's telling me that, well, in that case, one of the accounts is actually attached to a formula. So while we've removed most of the formulas through the hierarchies for account and organizational level, sometimes they're still necessary. But the nice thing about formulas in adaptive planning is that they're meaningful. Spreadsheet formulas are often very cryptic, something that's like A4 times $B, $15. And if you didn't create the spreadsheet, it's often very cumbersome and very difficult to pull out the business logic behind that formula. But with adaptive, it's very clear. With this cell highlighted in the March 2014 telephone line, You'll notice up here in the formula bar that the formula that's associated with that cell appears there. And it's very clear what the meaning is here. It's telling us that we're going to take our full-time equivalent, or head count, number from the personnel sheet, multiply that times an assumption about the costs for telephones per head, and it's in the United States because, in this case, the particular organizational unit we're dealing with applies in the United States. And then you might question to yourself, well, how is that $233 built up? Using spreadsheets, it can be kind of difficult to follow the formulas from this sheet to that sheet to the next. But Adaptive has a terrific tool within the sheet called Cell Explorer. And when I touch on that, it pops up another dialog where I can again now see the formula, the FTE, full-time equivalent, times the telephone cost per head. And I actually see the numbers that make up the $233 contribution. If I touch on the number here, it then takes me the detail behind that, and I see the personnel information that builds up that 5.83 head count, the individuals that are basically contributing to that. Some of them are full employees during the month, and that's why they're ones. Others have smaller amounts because either they're entering the company at that time or they're exiting at the company at that time due to retirement or the like. And you can further explore down, and it will tell you the sheet on which that information is entered. And if I touch that, it would launch me over into the personnel sheet where the information about that individual is collected. And we'll head over there in just a moment to take a look at some of the other sheets types, because that also talks about one of our best practices. Well, actually, that might be the thing to do now, given our time. There are other capabilities on the sheet I'll quickly mention that make it very easy to use. You can enter the numbers such as $100 for office supplies, and using a variety of features, you can make the entry of the data easy by copying to the end or highlighting a range of values and realizing that I would like to adjust those, increment them by a certain amount for that time period, and apply those figures as well. And those adjustments make it easy. It may also be possible that you'll say, well, the number I'm targeting there really isn't 4180 here in the total amount for office supplies. It's really 5,000. And once I enter that value, Adaptive provides me with a variety of breakback options that I can select. I apply that, and the change is apparent. You'll know that you've changed the numbers because the text appears in blue. And it'll stay that way until I hit the Save button. And once that's done, the information is written back into Adaptive and becomes permanent. I'll just highlight one other quick feature of the sheet here that's very useful. I'll clear this cell and copy it forward to the end. And one of the difficulties often when you're setting up spreadsheets is to come to some sort of agreement about what the list of accounts will be. What's the granularity that you're going to do your planning at? Well, Adaptive has a terrific feature that we call splits. Splits can really be thought of as being sub-accounts. And an example I'll just work through here, this particular department may be interested in planning their office supplies at a greater level of detail. So I'll add two splits to this particular department, toner and paper. And these splits will allow this individual department, North Sales or Sales North, to do their planning at that level of detail. I could then switch to another area, another department, and choose to plan my office supplies in a completely different manner, maybe using pens and paper clips. And what Adaptive allows each individual department to do is plan the way that they need. So it has a tremendous amount of flexibility there. That information is maintained and will appear in any other sheet or any other report that you create, allowing you to create an agreement at a higher level about the level of detail to collect for your plan, but then also offering your individual users the flexibility to go beyond what the spreadsheet says you have to do and give you the flexibility to plan the way that you need. that covers off most of the sheet details, but I'll just point out that there's a variety of sheet types that you can create in an organization, and this is really just an example of a few of them. These are basic sheets, represent perhaps different sub-plans that you're creating that will feed your master plan. And that was basically best practice number 3, where good organizations are using linked and driver-based plans to produce plans and forecasts of a higher quality. So you may require your individual departments to fill in a personnel sheet. This is just an example of an organization that chooses to plan by individual. Other organizations will choose to plan by job title or job class. And really the choice of the columns that appear here is really up to you as you perform your adaptive implementation. And we would just simply use the drop-downs here to choose the various titles that you configure when you set up adaptive for yourself, or the states that might perhaps drive some calculations about taxes, and really just go and fill these boxes in. Once you hit the Save button and those changes are made, the personnel information feeds back to your profit and loss statements, and those other formulas that appear on the original expenses sheet would be updated automatically. And that's a key point to make about adaptive planning, is that all changes provide you with immediate results. Whenever you make one change in a base level department, immediately the consolidated results are updated. Other tools or using spreadsheets, it's often very complicated because it involves linked files or copying data or processing cubes and the like. And it's often that your data can end up being mismatched, where the information is correct over in one area, but at the consolidated level or in another area of your model, it's incorrect. With adaptive planning, you always have immediate results. The numbers are always correct everywhere as soon as you hit the Save button. Other types of sheets that your organization might create in order to get those sub-plans built up would be a product sales. And this is really an example that's appropriate for perhaps a manufacturing type of company, where it's really key for them to plan by product and by customer the various units, the prices, the discounts, generating a gross revenue and net revenue figure that would then drive your total company's profit picture. So again, you can create these sub-plans or sub-schedules or sub-sheets that feed into the whole picture of your company. And then finally, you may have other requirements to capture new additions to your assets or capital planning. And in a very similar vein to what we saw with planning for personnel or headcount, you really just select some choices that you'll configure into the application, and then depending upon whether you've approved it, in this example, it will go ahead and calculate the asset spend as well as the depreciation that's associated with that, where that'll hit into the expense area of your profit and loss statement. So then quickly returning over to our expense sheet, I'll just highlight that another key point is having those drivers or assumptions. And we touched on that a little bit, where we had our telephone per head cost, and if we're calling it through the Cell Explorer, that amount was a $40 amount that had been assigned per head. Well, as a budget administrator, you may have a set of assumptions that drive factors in your plan, and we'll head over to the sheet where that information is collected about head or telephone cost per head. And you can see here is the $40 amount that's driving the calculation for telephone costs per department. And really by just adjusting these figures here, you could have all of the organization's numbers recalculated. If you were dealing with spreadsheets and had to visit each individual workbook that you sent out to each individual department, it can be very complicated and time-consuming to keep all of those workbooks, all those spreadsheets up to date as the assumptions change. With Adaptive, all the assumptions are stored centrally in one spot. So when your business changes, you change it in one place, and it makes it very easy to do that. So moving on to another best practice that was identified is good organizations really try to drive their planning process throughout the organization and encourage enterprise-wide collaboration. And as I sort of mentioned earlier as well, the sheets facilitate that capability because the sheets are only created once per template, essentially. You're not making copies. So if you want to allow various organizational units to get involved, you just create the various users in your organization and assign them the level of access in security for the area that they should be responsible for. So as an example of that, I'm just going to toggle over to another browser here where I've logged into the application as the North Sales Manager at your company. And what you'll notice in this spreadsheet, again, is our expense template, and the numbers look familiar. But you'll see that I've granted access to the North Sales Manager has been granted access to only see the Sales North department. They can't use the drop-down to change it to another area of the organization. It's only allowed, that individual is only allowed to see that particular part of the organization and work with the figures there. Contrast that to spreadsheets where often you're attempting to hide sheets or break up workbooks into separate pieces that you then have to assemble later. There's none of that with adaptive planning. You simply create a new user, grant them access to the data that they should see, and they immediately log into the cloud, and the numbers are ready, and they're ready to go. Another important point is in the other browser I was logged in as the budget administrator, so I saw everything. All the sheets, all of the various areas of the application that apply to the administrator. But logged in here as an individual department manager, I only see the parts of adaptive that are appropriate to me. And it reduces the amount of clutter or confusion that might challenge them when they start to use the application. The other particular feature that's very useful in managing a enterprise deployment to a large number of people is adaptive planning's workflow capabilities. Here we see the level or organizational tree, and it shows us the various areas and the status that they're in at this particular point in time in the budgeting process. So I can see that the Sales South department is currently working on their budget. It's in progress. Other areas such as Sales East and Sales West, their budget has been submitted and approved by the budget administrator. And if we visited any of the templates, the sheets, such as the expense sheet we're looking at, and took a look at Sales East, we'd see that all of the cells were locked and no one would be able to adjust those figures until perhaps the budget administrator perhaps caught a problem. And that was the case here in Sales North, where we can see that the budget was approved and then rejected. And that's why the figures could still be adjusted. But when the North manager was prepared to say, okay, my numbers are correct, they could attach a note and touch on the submit button, and so the numbers would then become locked into the review, submitted for review, such as here in Services Canada, appearing in blue with a little blue icon, meaning that the budget administrator now has a chance to review and either approve or reject. So it really controls the passing around of the information. Instead of emailing files here, there, and everywhere, trying to keep track of all those files, Workflow does that for you. There's no files. It's really all just stored in one central repository. And using a workflow tool like this, makes it very easy to manage the process. And it really allows you to drive the application out to a wider audience, improving the quality of the budgets and plans that you're building, and also building the accountability that was mentioned. It builds ownership of the plan at the individual department level, and the manager can't slough it off anymore and say, those aren't my numbers, because they are their numbers. Now, another point of best practice was related to self-service and on-demand. And you can really see those capabilities here in our reporting section of the application. The budget administrator builds a library of reports, and along with help from users as well, because users can create the reports themselves as well. And really builds a set of folders and places the reports in there, and really organized however makes sense for your organization. The individual user can also tag certain reports as favorites and keep those highlighted just like you would in a browser. And they can also, as an individual user, create reports and store them in a personal area where only they themselves can see them and they're not shared with the wider audience. We'll take a quick look at one of the reports. This is a variance analysis. And here on the screen, what we see is two versions being compared, actual to working budget, a variance between the two, a color-coded column that will perhaps identify areas of concern, such here is with the equipment rental, flagging that something is wrong if actuals are $1,200 and our budget's $3,400. There's an area of concern. Also a column for variance to prior month and prior year, and then also repeated with values for year-to-date. Going down the side, we're starting to see the familiar organizational tree. And we can also notice that some of the items are tagged with numbers, and those are notes that have been associated with those cells, allowing you to keep track of changes in the information in the data that's being collected. And you can choose to display those notes either as footnotes at the bottom, or what's often very handy is to see them in line so that the notes are appearing right at the point of where the numbers are being discussed. And I could choose to edit them or add to the conversation by attaching new notes onto there. The other point, too, is that the numbers, just as they were in the sheets, were explorable using the Cell Explorer. I can do the same thing here. We'll go back to our familiar telephone example. If I touch on the 3194, it opens up the Cell Explorer. I can see where that telephone expenses are coming from, and I can drill down through the level organization. I'll head over to North Sales, our familiar example, and again we'll see there's the formula and how the numbers are being calculated. So it makes it very easy to explore and drill through the information, really providing you with a self-service experience to gain insight into your data. Now, I'll show you that modifying these reports is very easy, or creating these reports is very easy. If I'd like to make a change to this report, I can touch on Modify Report, and it opens up a drag and drop experience for building or changing the reports. No coding required, no major technical skills required. It's really just becoming familiar with the layout of your account tree and then dragging the items that you're interested in place. I'd like to get a level further down, so I'll pull those in here, perhaps place the revenues on top of the expenses, and then run the report. And what we now see is I have a report that has, for variance analysis, with the revenue numbers at the top, which again, of course, are drillable into the various areas of detail. No coding, very flexible, very easy to do. And I'll just show you one other example of a report, because spreadsheets do have their uses, and often you may have a particular reporting package that you currently have and want to distribute to a managerial or executive audience that they're already comfortable with. And you can leverage adaptive planning to make that process easier. So here in this example, I'm just going to run our management reporting package for the month of 2014, March 2014. I could choose a different time period, or just choose the time period I'm interested in. I'll touch on Run Report, and it creates the Excel report. So here we have our monthly financial package tailored for March 2014, and it's been designed to have a functional P&L, a balance sheet, a cash flow, a metrics page, and also a page for charts. And those are just designed using the typical Excel approaches that you're used to today. And what Adaptive does is it drops in a following page called Report Data, where all the information that's necessary to build that report package is placed here. So you're kind of combining the best of both worlds with adaptive planning, having the numbers and the logic stored centrally, and yet using Excel to leverage its presentation capabilities, and also delivering the information out to your audience in a format that they're already comfortable with. So you can take advantage of all the great things in adaptive, and yet for the users who aren't ready to join up yet and get involved, you can make the process a little easier by first creating these or adapting your existing report package and slowly leading them into the process of adapting adaptive in a more involved way. So the final best practice I just wanted to cover involved the use of key performance indicators, dashboards, and scorecards in order to really do the analysis on your financial and operational metrics that are really critical to keeping your business on track. And adaptive discovery, a component of the adaptive suite, really allows you to visually see and engage with the financial and operational data that you have in your organization, but again, do it in a self-service and on-demand way. Here, currently, we're looking at a finance scorecard where there's a variety of different key performance indicators and financial trends. And as I hover over different areas of the chart, it explains what this is: the EBITDA value of 44.6, that the bad zone lies in a certain area. And over here in the gross margin, I can see that we're in a good zone. And so the information is understandable in that way, and the same goes with the various charts that are here at the bottom as well. And there's a whole library of different types of dials that you might use to convey the information about your organization. In this revenue scorecard within the finance perspective, I can see some product sales by geography. And these dials are interactive. So if I choose to see something here about the actuals in the United States that look interesting, I can touch on it and then expand down to greater levels of detail. So we'll investigate this particular piece of information by product, and it shows me that, oh, product A is the group that's contributing the most, and perhaps then I'd like to expand that further and look at that by organizational level and see that, oh, Sales North is the biggest contributor, and really follow your train of thought. Do that visual analytics that allow you to explore through your data. And adaptive planning maintains a history, sort of a path that you're taking through the information as you explore it, allowing you to kind of keep your train of thought as you go along. And when you're finished with that exploration, you just close it, and there you go. It's back to the original. And working with these dials and creating them is very easy. You really just choose to design the dial, and then using a settings dialogues that are very similar to the ones that you would use in Excel, you can set the various features of these dials in a very straightforward, non-programming fashion that any business professional can do. And I believe that actually covers off all 6 best practices, and that leaves us with a few minutes left for questions and answers. So I'll hand the podium back over to Ernie, and he can take it from there.
Oh, thank you very much, Brian. That was incredibly enlightening to see how the technology empowers best practices. So I think it was a great content flow. So from theory to how it works in practice, and then showing how the technology enables those best practices. So now I'd like to open the Q&A session. We have time for a few questions. Again, I encourage you to please ask any questions on today's topic via the questions area in your GoToWebinar control panel. The first question I'll direct to Brian. There's a question around the flexibility to show prior year actuals and pull in all that information and get one view year over year.
That's right. So really there's three different ways of pulling in information into adaptive. The first way we saw a lot of, which is basically through the sheets, where you're sitting down and adjusting numbers that are probably already been placed in there and filling those in that way. The second way is there's an integration tab that was at the top right-hand corner that you might have noticed. And using that, you can load in information in flat files. Basically, if you exported your details from the general ledger about your actuals, you could pull it in through flat files there as well. And we also have another type of software called adaptive connectors. Adaptive connectors are pieces of software that link adaptive to other systems like your general ledger, your ERP, other internal systems that you might have, HR systems, where you would have actual information that you want to capture and pull into adaptive planning. And using those adaptive connectors, that information can be pulled in on demand or on a scheduled basis, whatever made sense for the planning solution that you're putting together. And we have a large library of different adaptive connectors that work with all the popular general ledger packages, with all the popular ERP packages. And that list is available on our website, and you can investigate. I think the list is up to 85 or something like that. So we have something for most cases, and if not, an adaptive connector can be created for your particular situation as well.
Great. Thank you very much, Brian. A couple more specific questions about the application, then we'll have a few questions for Rick that are queued up. Can you speak to the ability to have sort of an approval process? So you might want to have someone making an entry, and then is there a way to make sure that doesn't go live until there's an approval, or is that something that you can do or something that is coming down the pipe at all?
Well, there is, to some degree, that is in the workflow where basically you can lock the numbers so they're not changing after they've been submitted. But in terms of having sort of a intermediate area where the number is half changed but not public, that's currently not in the product. I think that we are headed in that direction because there's a new feature called Process Tracker that's being introduced to the consolidation area in actually just in a few days at the beginning of September, which will then find its way over to the planning side in January. And they're moving to a way to sort of build tasks and create processes that manage the process sort of on a step-by-step basis. So they're heading in that direction, but in terms of when that exact feature will be delivered, I'm not clear. Although that's something I could contact our product development group with, and they'd be able to sort of provide some direction about that.
Okay, great. Can you speak real quickly? I know you mentioned it and did a great job on as far as the tracking ability. So is there ability to track, who monitors each cell, and can you go in and do it by user?
Sure. One thing I didn't mention, which I should have, is that adaptive planning keeps a complete audit trail. So in that Cell Explorer, you might have noticed in the top right-hand corner, there's a link also for audit trail. And if you touch on that audit trail, it produced a list of everyone who's ever changed that number. So it keeps a complete history of who's changed which numbers at what time and from the old value to the new value. So you're able to very clearly see, like where I was adjusting numbers and saving them. Every time I hit the save, adaptive planning is capturing the fact that I've changed that numbers at that time, which numbers I changed, and from what number to what number. So it has a complete audit trail in that way.
Great. Thank you very much. I'd like to ask Rick a few quick questions here before we wrap up the Q&A. The first one is just how long was the implementation process on your end to actually get the solution up and running?
Sure. Admittedly, I had actually implemented adaptive planning several times before I joined EngineYard, but I was able to do it within, I think it was 2 weeks. And that being said, if you're familiar with Excel and you've built models in Excel before, you're not going to have any issue building a model in adaptive planning. So, it was very quick for us. We were up and running and able to discover problems in our Excel planning very quickly through using the application, but I admittedly did have experience with the with the application before.
Okay, great. Final question for the Q&A, and we will follow up afterwards with any Q&A questions we didn't get to. Rick, what would you say are your 2 to 3 best lessons learned in implementing this type of solution?
First and foremost, it's just being the ability to be flexible and be a proactive part of the team in terms of finance. You know, being reactionary always keeps you a step behind the business, but being able to look forward, you know, create scenarios that have different assumptions and being able to outline those to the greater team is immensely beneficial to the organization. Another key point is really the collaboration, getting the team members to actually proactively participate in the planning process is just worth its weight in gold. It no longer becomes finance's numbers, it becomes the organization's numbers. And again, going back to the whole audit trail, there's no escaping. If someone makes an error, someone makes an error, but you at least can track it down and figure out why someone thought something was going to be this way. And it's not so much in terms of assigning blame in any area of the organization, but it's really in getting everyone to buy into the set of numbers and no longer questioning the numbers. It's more driving the change in the business and the analysis of what has happened.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. With that, I'd like to close the Q&A session. Again, any questions we did not get to, we'll follow up on those after later on. As a reminder, you'll be asked to take a survey once the webinar concludes. We greatly appreciate your feedback. And we invite you to please join us at www.performance.com to ask questions and to continue the conversation with your peers and experts you've heard from today. A special thank you to Rick, Paul, and Brian for their time and insight. They're clearly thought leaders in their fields and an excellent source of information on today's topics. Note that in the post-webinar survey, you have the opportunity to express your interest in being connected with either or all speakers or our sponsor with just one or a few mouse clicks. I'd also like to thank today's sponsor once again, Adaptive Planning. And finally, a big thank you to our audience for your valuable time. Thank you very much, everyone, and make the rest of your day great. We hope to see you on performative.com.